The European Union is considering a plan to impose a 12th set of sanctions on Russia over its war in Ukraine. As well as the existing measures covering everything from energy to banking, the new plan would introduce tougher reporting requirements. Those would be designed to crack down on the illegal purchase of Russian oil, which is now commonly being traded above the $60 a barrel cap. The new sanctions would also impose restrictions on purchases of Russian liquefied propane and potentially a ban on Russian diamonds. Now, that last proposal to crack down on Russia's diamond exports would have an especially big impact on the Belgian city of Antwerp, which has long been at the centre of the global diamond trade.
The world's largest diamond mines are here in northeastern Siberia. It's a profitable business for the Russian state-owned corporation Alrosa. In 2021, the company generated revenue of over €3 billion. Typically, the gemstones extracted here are sent abroad as rough diamonds. Often, they end up in the European Union. After months of negotiations, the EU is finally moving to put sanctions on Russian diamonds. The process of banning Russian diamonds has taken months. The centre of the global diamond trade is the Belgian port city of Antwerp, and so far the Belgian government has resisted those sanctions. Dealers worry that if Russian diamonds are banned, the industry may relocate to somewhere like India. India is a rising player in the global diamond business. Already 90% of the world's diamonds are being cut and processed here. This new exchange, which claims to be the largest office building in the world, reflects the ambitions of the Indian diamond industry. Traders in Antwerp are skeptical that European sanctions will significantly harm Russia.
Take China, which is a major consumer of diamonds, have absolutely no interest in that ban. India, which is also a major consumer of diamonds, they have no interest in that ban. I mean, they don't have no interest to know from where the stones are. It's never been the case. And most of Asia, there's no interest in that.
If India does not back the EU's sanctions, they'll be undermined, because the origin of a diamond can only be traced in its rough, uncut state. Later, its trail becomes blurred. To make sanctions more effective, there are now calls for a better system for tracking the origin of diamonds. But right now, loopholes in the documents proving where they came from mean they continue to be put on the market.
Let's talk more about this with DW Correspondent Teri Schultz in Brussels. Teri, diamonds are an interesting example of how sanctions can potentially backfire. Where does the EU stand now when it comes to a potential ban?
Well, as was mentioned in that story, the European Commission has proposed now for the first time to put Russian diamonds on its sanctions list in this 12th package. And the reason it's so long coming is because Belgium has successfully lobbied to keep them off the menu, in part for some of the problems that were mentioned in that piece about traceability of origin and doubts as to whether they could actually be effectively kept off the market. Antwerp sees 90% of the world's diamonds come through there at one point or another, so you can see why this was such a huge issue for Belgium. But now, with the United States already having banned Russian diamonds and the G7 considering proposals, Belgium has decided that it simply has to get on board, and it is in fact making some of these proposals itself as to how this would work. Now, a lot of this focuses on traceability, on how to make sure that the diamonds which would be banned actually came from Russia, and to make sure that other countries aren't masking the origins and going ahead and trading them. So Belgium is working on a proposal that would significantly focus on the traceability and, in fact, make Belgium perhaps the gatekeeper for the diamonds coming into the EU and the G7. So it clearly is not giving up its perch at the top of the diamond trade, but simply trying to make sure that if these sanctions come into place, which could be so damaging to this country, that they are as airtight as possible. But there are a lot of complications ahead in this sanctions package. As I said, it was just introduced last week. Member states are now debating amongst themselves. The diamond ban is only part of the package, and of course there are other countries against other parts of the package. And we're hearing that while the Commission would have liked this to be agreed already, it's unlikely that there would be complete unanimity until EU leaders themselves come to Brussels for a meeting in mid-December.
It's so complicated, isn't it? These next set of sanctions would be the EU's 12th. Are they actually making a big difference to Russia's war chest?
Well, certainly no one would say that they've made as big a difference as quickly as the European Union or the United States or its allies would like. Russia has resisted sort of the economic collapse that everyone would have liked to see when it comes to being able to fund its war on Ukraine. When it comes to diamonds, Russia made $4 billion from the diamond trade last year, so that would significantly cut into the Kremlin's coffers. But one of the other things that the EU is looking at increasingly is the circumvention of its sanctions. Now, you mentioned earlier this oil cap at $60 per barrel, and it's well known that shippers, insurers, and shipping companies are getting around that ban. So one of the things the EU is looking at as it looks to impose new sanctions is simply to enforce the sanctions that are already on the book, and they think that would go a long way toward keeping money out of Russia's war chest.
And finally, Terry, it's looking like the EU will not be able to deliver on its promised military support for Ukraine. How damaging could that be for Kyiv?
Certainly, that's something that we learned last week when it comes to this promise to provide 1 million rounds of artillery ammunition to Ukraine last year. It has looked very unlikely for a long time, and finally last week, the European Union admitted that it had only delivered 300,000 of these rounds so far, with the deadline of March. So that certainly is news that's being taken very with sadness in Kyiv, because it very much needs that ammunition simply to keep up its daily battle against Russia. And there are bad signs from other capitals as well. Washington is warning that it will not be able to sustain its military support for Kyiv. So they're very much looking toward this new round of sanctions, toward enforcing the airtightness of these sanctions, to at least if the Ukrainians are not being provided everything they had hoped to get from the EU, they would like to at least keep money out of Russian pockets.
Teri Schultz, a pleasure to talk to you. Thank you so much.